Let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly massive geopolitical earthquake. This wasn't something that just happened overnight. We're talking about a deeply complex, 90-year chain of events that literally tore the Indian subcontinent apart.
Just imagine the unbelievable stakes here. You've got Sir Cyril Radcliffe, right? A respected British lawyer. But here's the kicker. He had never actually set foot in India. Yet, he gets locked in a room in Delhi with nothing but some population tables and a pencil, and he's given 5 weeks. 5 weeks to draw a border that would determine the fate of 200 million people. It's almost unimaginable. So how on earth did things get to this desperate ticking clock moment?
Section 1. The Seeds of Division. To make sense of it all, we really have to rewind the clock a bit.
It's incredibly fascinating to trace exactly how this fracturing happened. If you go back to 1857, Hindu and Muslim soldiers were actually fighting side by side in a massive rebellion against the British. But, after the British crushed that mutiny, they totally doubled down on a divide-and-rule strategy. By 1905, they went as far as splitting the province of Bengal right down religious lines. Now sure, they reversed that decision later, but the damage was already done. It sparked the creation of the All India Muslim League in 1906, and just a few years later in 1909, we see separate voting electorates set up for Muslims. The crack in the foundation was officially there.
And long before the intense political battles of the 1940s, we start seeing the philosophical roots of what would eventually be called the two-nation theory. You have reformers like Sir Syed Ahmed Khan essentially arguing that Hindus and Muslims were like two separate streams of water. They could travel together, sure, but they'd never truly mix. He strongly believed that Muslims needed to focus on their own education and protect their unique social and cultural identity.
Now, this growing divide, it is perfectly embodied by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. This is wild to think about now, but early in his career, Jinnah was actually a member of the Secular Indian National Congress. People literally called him the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. But over time, feeling pushed out by the Congress leadership and Mahatma Gandhi's mass movement tactics, Jinnah stepped away. When he makes his big return to politics in the 1930s, his stance has completely done a 180. He's now demanding a completely separate state, positioning himself as the sole spokesperson for India's Muslims.
Section 2. A widening political divide. As we move deeper into the 20th century, the goals of the Congress and the Muslim League just become totally incompatible.
The crucial thing to understand here is this absolute, unmoving deadlock. On one side, you have Jawaharlal Nehru and the Congress pushing hard for a strong central government. They felt that was the only way to keep this vast, diverse country from splintering. But on the exact opposite side, Jinnah and the Muslim League looked at a strong center and saw a very different future, a permanent Hindu majority rule. To protect Muslims, they demanded deep provincial autonomy. It was basically an ideological brick wall. Neither side was going to budge.
But then, 1937 hits, and the Muslim League gets a massive reality check. They perform really poorly in the provincial elections, winning only 22% of the seats that were actually reserved for Muslims. Even so, they reach out to Congress, offering to form coalition governments in certain areas. And Congress, they flatly refuse. For a lot of Muslims, that rejection was a huge red flag. It ignited this profound fear that under a Congress-run India, their voices would be completely shut out. Then comes the ultimate turning point. Boom! World War II breaks out. Britain drags India into the fight without even bothering to consult Indian leaders. Outraged, Congress leaders resign from all their provincial ministries in mass protest. But think about what that does. It creates this massive political vacuum right across the provinces. And the Muslim League? They brilliantly step right into that empty space, growing their power while Congress leaders are sitting in jail. This whole sequence of events directly leads to the famous March 1940 Lahore Resolution, which officially puts the demand for independent Muslim states on the table.
By the time the 1945 and 1946 elections roll around, the math has completely flipped. The Muslim League captures roughly 87% of the Muslim reserved seats. So now, Jinnah has the undeniable mandate he needed. He proved to the British and to Congress that he really was the sole voice for India's Muslims. A separate Pakistan wasn't just a theory anymore. The voters were backing it.
Section 3. The Final Negotiations. So, World War II ends. Britain is economically completely exhausted, facing naval mutinies, and the frantic race to officially hand over power is on.
The British decided to try one last desperate compromise. It was called the 1946 Cabinet Mission Plan. The idea was to keep India united, but under a super weak central government that only handled defense, foreign affairs, and communication. The real power would go to 3 distinct groups of provinces, which essentially gave the Muslim-majority areas in the northwest and east the exact autonomy Jinnah wanted. And surprisingly, initially, both sides kind of agreed to it.
But then, July 1946, Nehru holds a press conference and drops a bombshell. He publicly states that once Congress was in the Constituent Assembly, they absolutely retained the right to change this cabinet mission plan as they saw fit. For Jinnah, this just confirmed his absolute worst fears. He felt Congress would just use their majority to dismantle Muslim autonomy the second the British sailed away. And just like that, the fragile agreement completely collapsed.
Feeling totally cornered, Jinnah rejects the plan outright. He makes this defining declaration: India would either be divided or destroyed. He called for direct action to force the issue of a separate Pakistan. The political chess match had officially hit its breaking point.
Meanwhile, Mahatma Gandhi is just heartbroken. He wants to prevent partition at literally any cost, so he goes to the last viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, with this desperate final offer: give the entire government to his rival. He essentially says, make Jinnah the prime minister. Let him run the country. Just please keep India united. But Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel shut that down immediately. They had tried working with the League in an interim government, found it completely paralyzing, and truly believed Gandhi's offer would just destroy the country.
Section 4. Violence and the Last Plan. Because while the politicians were deadlocked in the halls of Delhi, the reality down on the streets was turning into a nightmare. When Direct Action Day kicked off in August 1946, it triggered horrific, bloody riots in Calcutta, leaving thousands dead. And that violence spread like wildfire. Noakhali, Bihar, the Punjab, it was everywhere. Gandhi actually walked barefoot through dozens of riot-torn villages, desperately trying to broker peace, neighbor by neighbor. But the sheer scale of the hatred and this terrifying eye-for-an-eye mentality made it brutally clear to everyone else that peaceful coexistence was fading fast.
So, staring down the barrel of a full-blown civil war, Lord Mountbatten and his advisor V.P. Menon drafted the final, irreversible blueprint, the Mountbatten Plan of June 1947. British India would be legally divided into 2 independent dominions, India and Pakistan. The massive provinces of Punjab and Bengal would be carved right down the middle based on religious majorities. Reluctantly, everyone agreed.
But wait, throw this massive complication into the mix. 565. That is the number of independent princely states scattered all over the subcontinent. All of a sudden, these hundreds of kings and nawabs had to make a rapid-fire choice about whether their lands would merge with India or Pakistan. It added this incredible layer of tension to a map that was already ready to explode. Section 5. The Stroke of Midnight. August 1947 arrives. The ticking clock finally runs out, and those theoretical pencil lines drawn by Cyril Radcliffe become a sudden, bleeding reality.
It brings us to the most haunting question of this entire explainer. How do you actually divide a people? How do you neatly untangle neighbors who have shared the same fields, traded in the same markets, and spoken the same languages for literally centuries? The tragic answer is, you just can't. Not without immense pain.
The human cost here is just absolutely staggering. We're talking about one of the largest and deadliest mass migrations in the history of humanity. Around 15 million people were completely uprooted from their ancestral homes. Somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million innocent lives were lost in the communal violence that followed. Tens of thousands of women were kidnapped. Massive refugee camps overflowed overnight. You know, behind all that high-level politics of Nehru, Jinnah, and Mountbatten were millions of everyday people whose lives were just shattered. You had ghost trains crossing the new borders, arriving completely silent, soaked in blood. Empty homes in Lahore and Delhi standing as these eerie, silent witnesses to families who locked their doors, grabbed whatever they could carry, and walked into the total unknown, probably thinking they'd be back in a few weeks. As we wrap up this explainer and reflect on the immense tragedy and the momentous independence of 1947, it really leaves us with a profound thought. A pencil line drawn in 5 weeks successfully created the modern nations of India and Pakistan. But when you look at the deeply intertwined roots, the shared culture, and the generational trauma of the subcontinent, you have to ask yourself, can a border ever truly divide a shared history? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history that shapes our world today.